Basques Y-DNA R1b up to 70 to 85%. Basques exhibit Y-DNA haplogroup R1b, particularly R1b DF27, this at very high frequencies, with some estimates reaching up to 70 to 85%. This group is younger. This strong association with R1b could link the Basque paternal or Y-DNA lineage to a major European population expansion that we claim to have happened from 8,000 until 4,500 years ago, this based on ancient DNA findings, David Reich, 2021. But it could also very well have preceded it, simply because the Aurignacian culture was carrying Y-DNA-C and also R1b, but in their case it was an early or ancient R1b still without the in Western Eurasia arriving M269 mutation, which provingly was arriving in Western Eurasia until around 4,500 years ago. This also R1b carrying Aurignacian culture already had been culturally present in parts of Europe, this 47,000 to 41,000 years ago, already covering the strategical region in Spain where the Basques were active before the major Neolithic Western European population expansion, until around 4,500 years ago, and as said the Basques retained the so-called hunter-gatherer DNA, and also remained rhesus negative, which we claim at least partially to have been related to this much earlier Ice Age Aurignacian culture. Major European population expansion. According to consensus, this population extension occurred during the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age was a historical period defined by the widespread use of bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin, for tools, weapons, and art, following the Stone Age and preceding the Iron Age. This era, which began at different times in different regions, and roughly 3,300 to 1,200 BCE in the Middle East, saw major advancements like urbanization, writing systems, and extensive trade networks. While R1b is often associated with Indo-European peoples, Basques speak a non-Indo-European language, highlighting the complex genetic history of the region, where a significant influx of R1b males occurred around 4,000 years ago, replacing the older Paleolithic, Neolithic Y chromosome lineages. Despite that the Basques had known to isolate themselves, the high frequency of R1b DF27 seems to indicate they were turned over or kind of reinforced later around 4,200 years ago, possibly so over a longer period of time, and in any case that they still managed to preserve their unique language, etc. R1b DF27 is also found, to a lesser extent, in other more northern areas of Europe, including Great Britain, Ireland, Germany, and Poland. In any case, the preserving and or reinforcing arrival seems to have taken place through the high north of the Atlantic gyres, with none of them landing directly in places that are inside the Mediterranean, possibly avoiding the older haplogroups or R1b cultures more still related to the Bronze Age cultures, and the Austronesian expansions, instead of these Atlantic expansions, which historically had been or rather had come in power in the Mediterranean earlier on, and which would lose power and control in the Mediterranean, and consequently the Gibraltar Passage, only or more completely by the time of the Late Bronze Age collapse. R1b DF27 would enter Spain through the Cantabrian coast, green, possibly hide out in the Cantabrian Mountains, blue, just behind the coast, and at the right moment break through east to the east coast of Spain, and into the Mediterranean, this through the Ebro River, when they would get involved in conflicts while still in Spain. Battle scene from Les Dugs, Castellan, Spain. On your screen. So the later arriving R1b DF27 possibly hid out with the ancestors of the Basques, and could take a short cut to the Mediterranean through the Ebro River, to wage war or attacks against the Bronze Age cultures. Since they had only recently navigated the Atlantic Ocean, possibly used the Native American plume hairdresses, were exotic, and navigated large ships, they very well could have been an essential part of the sea peoples that would successfully invade and make collapse the Bronze Age cultures, in the Late Bronze Age collapse, and ultimately also Egypt. And probably trigger also its fall or its loss in power and trade, also by controlling the Gibraltar Passage and the West Mediterranean coasts. R1b DF27 is a very common Y chromosome lineage in the Iberian Peninsula, representing an important branch of the R1b lineage in the region, associated with the presence of the Celtic and Celtiberian peoples. War, 5,000 years ago in S.J.A.P.L in Spain. Possibly you could more or less detect by the headdresses of some Similar to some of the roughly 1,000 to 2,000 years later sea peoples, that at least one party involved in the war could have been Native Americans, or descendants of them, possibly ambushed by the experienced Basques, and who are at least partly similar and related to the Pelasgians, or the Basques ambushed by the tall, trained and well-fed Native Americans warriors. Basques still have one of the highest concentrations of rhesus-negative or Rh-negative blood in the world. This unique genetic trait, along with a high prevalence of type O blood, just like all Native Americans, supports the Basques' distinctiveness as a European population with a long history of relative isolation in the Pyrenees Mountains, and that they had been capable to hold off the population turnover events which occurred dominantly between 8,000 and 4,500 years ago. The Atlas Mountain Berbers also show elevated Rh-negative frequencies. We also claim that the Atlas Mountain Berbers also were ancient out of Americans, just like the Basques, and that they too had arrived more or less the same way as the ancestors of the Basques had arrived. It is clear that both places, just like most of the Aurignacian culture from 47,000 to 41,000 years ago, to whom we relate the oldest Basques and Atlas Mountains Berbers to, are amongst the most exposed to the North Atlantic gyre and currents, in fact in the whole world. Ancient DNA presenting Y-DNA haplogroup R1b, especially together with all ancestral markers, prove us all along that out of Americans roughly 5,000 years ago, and the Aurignacian culture carrying Y-DNA C and R1b, probably some older variant of it, between 47,000 and 41,000 years ago, were arriving in Western Eurasia and Western Africa through the North Atlantic gyre and currents. This simply so, and amongst other Y-DNA C and R1b have their prehistoric roots in the Americas. Please comment with your doubts and remarks, as we pretend to complete or to remake this same video, for it to become more useful and or understandable for you and others. We do not pretend to feature popular, nor widely accepted videos, but rather to rewrite parts, especially of human history, that are scientifically proven to be improbable at this point in time. Also ask for more or better illustrations and or proofs, if this would be helpful. Please remember that you should not call yourself an alternative historian or historian, if you do not clarify at least some part of history, or do not add up with a fully scientifically supported history, or with a history without too many paradigms. Like consensus still fails to do so, and most historians, even alternative historians, also fail to do so until now. Criticizing or doubting the historical vision or timelines of others, independent if this is consensus or mainstream or none of both, is not exactly being a historian, or at least not a historian that adds up to history. Thank you.